Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pi, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. On the surface, it took just 2 lengths of an Olympic swimming pool to change Duncan Goodhew's life. But as any elite athlete will tell you, success like Duncan's isn't about what you do on the day. What counts is the person that you and those around you shape yourself to become before you even compete. The parallels between sport and business are easy to draw, and through Swimathon, for which he is the president, he's combined the best of both worlds to make a monumental impact. Join us as Duncan shares the architecture that makes a victorious leader, why your hardest work should come on your worst day, and the mental models that'll transform the team around you. I'm super excited today to be talking to you, Duncan. Thank you so much for coming on Pivot Points. Would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit and giving people a sense of your incredible career?
Well, I suppose I was formed by what went wrong. and any way you cut me, slice me, I bleed water. And I'm known for swimming 2 lengths, the taps and back, as one comedian once said. And was fortunate enough to win gold medal at the Olympic Games in Moscow 1980. And that kind of changed my life. That was indeed a pivot point where my life changed as a consequence.
And I mean, that sort of pivotal moment in your life, what was the journey to get to gold? And then we'll talk about what happened. How did it change your life? But I'd love to sort of hear how you got to gold, because that is an incredible achievement.
Well, I suppose, David, I was really fortunate. And many people are good at many things. And if you're good at many things, you have a problem deciding what to be great at. And in my case, I was bald and dyslexic at school. I was really struggling in the classroom, and swimming was my life preserver that was thrown to me by fate, by chance. And what I found very early on in life, it's people that make the difference. And, you know, a lot of people talk about empowerment, but in my case, I think it is literally permission. So thank you to all those people who were good enough to have faith in me. And I think, like anything, as you go through life, you kind of develop value systems. And we've discussed it once or twice before, David, about, you know, and I think you were saying, well, Duncan, you're almost like a brand, which, you know, it feels really weird talking that way, doesn't it? A brand? What do you mean? But it's the kind of value systems you develop through experience, through people, through the learnings you have. And throughout my life, I've had incredible learnings. And that kind of retirement at age 23 was quite a surprise. And I've been gradually retiring again ever since then. And in some senses, and you know, my wife gets angry when I say this, living with winning is more difficult than winning in itself. And I think anybody who's had success will think about it. I think, David, you really understand that, don't you?
Yeah. And I'm interested in that word permission. When you say the people around you and you're thankful for those people giving you permission, is that related to belief, or is that just giving you the encouragement and the permission to do something you didn't think you could do? What do you mean by permission?
Well, I suppose one case in point, just to kind of use a story to kind of capitalize on it, is, you know, people around you make the difference, because, you know, on a bad day, they'll believe in your ability more than you believe in yourself. And we all have this kind of innate bit in it. Somebody's going to find out I'm not as good as they think I am. and so in winning or succeeding, how do you overcome the almost survival gene in you that doubts your own ability? For instance, when I was swimming, I came up and I questioned my right to be there. Who me? Why me? And over, you know, many experiences, I thought, well, hang on a second. It's more than just physical. It's more than just the task you're doing. There's a psychology of winning and a psychology of gaining the edge over your competition, whatever your competition is. Because at the end of the day, not only do you have teams and people that foster your belief in yourself and how you're going to support yourself in winning and help you through the bad days, but also your customers, your competition also give you permission to win. So if you get it right, as I fortunately did, you win before you've tied your swimsuit. There's a story around that. I can't tell, but it's quite a long one. But it's that whole thing of how do you use our humanity, and our humanity is insecurity. That's how we stay out of danger. When something's new, it feels odd. So when it feels odd, it slows down. You slow down because it might be dangerous. It may be that you're coming onto a big tiger or something like that when you're hunting. And you don't want to be first there. You want to arrive at the same time or just behind.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's how do you kind of break through that human quality of which is protection, protect yourself first. And it's so deep in us and not obvious. So how do you overcome it?
Do you think people showed you how to overcome that, or you overcame that yourself? Because to get into that, I mean, you're talking tenths of seconds, aren't you? You're talking tiny margins to get yourself to a point where you win a gold medal. But the mental mindset you must need to achieve that must be quite incredible. I'd love to hear about, a bit more about you've won before you put your trunks on, sort of thing. Or
Well, as I said, it's the psychology of win. How do you win? At first, you've got to have a vision, a dream, and for me, that came at a very early age. I went to an interview at Millfield School in Somerset, and the founder and head, a guy called Boss, amazing man, interviewed me. And during the interview, I was about 13 years old. He did a few things. First of all, he spotted that I was dyslexic and explained to me what that was, which was, that was an epiphany to me and changed my life right there and then. And then he sent me down to the swimming pool where the only full-time professional coach asked me to swim a 4x1 medley, so 4 lengths, 1 length of each stroke. And as I set off, I realized I couldn't swim butterfly. And I was, 13-ish years old. And just to give you a context, Sharon Davis went to the Olympic Games swimming a 400 meters medley at the age of 12. So wow. Here I was at 13, not able to swim butterfly. And not being the sharpest pencil in the case, I left it out and didn't put anything in its place. So I ended up at the wrong end of the pool. And yes, there is a wrong end of the pool eventually. The coach decided that he had to come down to the wrong end of the pool. He said, "Duncan, you appear to be the wrong end of the pool. Do you know why?" So I had to admit that, I couldn't swim butterfly. And I then proceeded to try and drown myself in embarrassment, failed there, and pulled myself out and got changed. And we were just walking up to Boss's office with my parents and myself, looking at the stitching on our shoes with great embarrassment, downcast. And Boss walked up and he walked far too close to me. And so I had to look up and he looked down and it was one of those moments where he was looking into my soul. The blue eyes were piercing right into my soul. And he said, "Paddy," to the coach, the only full-time coach in Britain at the time, "will he swim for the school?" And the coach said, "He'll swim for the school, the county, the district, and the country, and he'll go beyond that." Right there, that great man seeded the whole idea of having a dream in my life. And when it crystallized, it came together, and I saw the Olympics with Mark Spitz winning all the gold medals. I understood what he meant beyond that. And I suppose at that point, you've got to ask yourself, are you a Boss or are you a Gore Vidal, who famously once said, "If a friend does well, a bit of me dies inside." And unfortunately, so many people are Gore Vidals rather than bosses. Yeah.
I mean, you must have gone from 13. What were you, 23 when you won the gold medal? So that's 10 years of work to go on that journey. And how did you stay with it?
Well, I think it was the dream of swimming against the whole world under one roof with one common language, the common language of sport. And at that point, it was just about going. It wasn't about winning. And as I went through, my career, obviously the hard work started to get much more. And there was a pivotal moment where my father died and I had to leave Millfield. They gave me a scholarship for a little while. And they suggested I went to American University. And the coach was very clever because he talked to my economics professor. And I found out I was quite good at economics. And he happened to be American. So I ended up at American University, and that was a pivotal point because I suppose in my life I'd been thinking about betterment, self-betterment, best times all the time. How do you move forward? And I hadn't really got into winning. And the coach, just coming back to the people thing, one day I was struggling, in my first year with and studied all night for an accountancy exam. And the next morning I was training at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was literally falling asleep on the kickboard. Anyway, the coach, it said Chrome Dome. I don't know why he called me Chrome Dome. You pissant. I don't know what a pissant is, but I assume it wasn't very nice. If you're not going to swim hard, get into the deep end. So I winged the kickboard at him and missed and stomped out and eventually went up to his office. And we had a very long conversation. I was really ready to throw it all in. And he eventually said something it was so attractive and caustic at the same time. He said, if I don't work you as hard as I possibly can, I'm cheating you. And it brought on this sudden recognition that, there are things that you do in life to win that you don't want to do, because they're difficult, they're hard, they're outside your comfort level, whatever it is. And you need people around you to help you, give you permission to do things that are extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, it's an incredible story. And so you win gold in Moscow and suddenly you're a household name. That must have been quite difficult to deal with, that sudden change of status. Or maybe Montreal had started the process. And
yeah, I mean, in Montreal I was 18 years old. I really thought I had a chance for a gold medal. And when I went they have a cool room, it's just a little room. Now it's a corridor, but back then it was a glass room, which is soundproof, double glazed, one-way glass. You had TV monitors showing you what was going on outside the room, gold medals being won and lost. And the 8 fastest people in the world are kind of ferried in there. And when I walked in to this room, and the door hermetically sealed shut behind me, the silence really got to me. Here I was, Duncan Goodhew, nobody from nowhere, with the gods, the lions of my sport. and it was like somebody pulled the plug hole out of the room, and I was going, who me? I feel awful. And I nearly went down the plug hole. So it was kind of lamb to the slaughter there. I did manage 7th. And the first reaction to work really hard. And that didn't work because 2 years later, if I'd been given 1 second by God, I would have won the NC2As. I would won 3 gold medals in the Commonwealth Games and the World Championships, which I got 4th in.
Yeah.
by 3, I think we're 300th of a second or something like that. And at that point, it was the psychology. So moving on for the next 2 years, I really, really started working on specific things like performance integrity and everything. And when I finished, and your question about how did you transition, I planned to win, and we call it manifesting now. But of course, back then in the day, there was nothing called manifesting. And I'd gone to see a clinical psychoanalyst because there were no sports psychologists there, because I wanted to kind of understand, and I'd been talking to one of my coaches at the time, a British coach. I wanted to understand how you can get rid of interference factors in your mind, because when you're uncomfortable or the pressure's on, the mind can do weird things to you. And so I went to see Maurice Yaffe, this incredible guy, and he gave me a plan to kind of look after this, and it was concentrated on your breathing, which was absolute disaster because breathing's part of timing in swimming. And when you concentrate on your breathing, of course, your whole stroke falls to pieces. But I started seeing the end first, so seeing the perfect swim, how many strokes per length, what's the perfect dive, the turn, then watching myself in the audience do it. So it became so normal to me. And then I tried emotionalization. What would it feel like to be the best in the world? What an absurd comment, the best in the world. What would that feel like, and how would I respond to it? So when I got to Moscow, I knew I was there when I went into the call room. And the after bit, I'd kind of planned as well, because I'd already got an agent, and I knew that I'd have a good few years of hay, as it were. And David Wilkie, great David Wilkie, breaststroker before me, had done very well after he won a gold medal. And I thought, well, I'll just enjoy life and then I'll set up a business. But I thought I'll look a bit wider to who else was around. And there was one guy, 17 and a half years after his defining moment, who seemed to have defied gravity. He was a bigger name, and he was from a violent sport, boxing, but he was the most loved person, a sports person of the last century. And I looked at him and I thought, what does he do differently? And there were three things that I identified to what this great man, Henry Cooper, did. He had time for others, and he had time for what he believed in. So time, and he had empathy. He had bags of empathy. So, in shaping my after swimming career, I looked at him and said, I've got to understand what I'm doing as a person, in a sense, what I stand for, my values and everything. And, one of the things I felt deeply about was the fact that you've got to give back. There's a huge thing about giving. And I felt that I needed to give back to my sport, swimming, and sport in general. And so that kind of shaped a lot of what became my after swimming career. Mm. And I was involved in many businesses. But in a sense, a friend of mine says, well, Duncan, you are your own business. You are your own business. And so that I hadn't really expected. And I don't think I succeeded in the sense that Henry Cooper has.
Yeah.
But he came from boxing. It was a different sport and everything else. And so I made a different career to Henry, which has been successful in different ways. What I would deem successful, other people might not, because success, it has to have ownership to be, I've seen so many people say, oh, that person's really successful. And you look at them going, you must be joking. They've made a lot of money, but they've been divorced 4 times. Their kids won't talk to them. Their reputation is not one that has a little smell to it.
Yeah.
And you go, well, that's not success.
When you got to that point where you stopped competitive swimming, did you stop competitive swimming straight after Moscow? And because that's a big pivotal moment in any competitive sports person's life. And then that finding of the next purpose and, looking at people like Henry Cooper and how they built their sort of careers. Did you become as driven about something else as you were driven to win that gold medal? Did that characteristic translate over?
Well, I mean, first of all, I did carry on swimming. I did. I started swimming masters, and I did, 1 or 2 things, but it became complicated. It became, a target on my back, and I didn't want to repeat what I'd done, so I had to move on a bit. But swimming has come centre to part of that. So, yeah, I think for the first few years, the most difficult thing was not having, a overbearing goal that was going to gobble your life up. And I was very fortunate. One of my coaches said, Duncan, you've got some left in the tank. I know that you want to carry on, but do yourself a favor. You've done it, move on to something else. Now imagine a coach, trying to persuade their swimmer to give up, and so that again comes down to people being very special in your life, because what are you going to do? Just repeat the same experience? To me, the Olympic journey had been one of discovery, of reinvention, of building myself. And if I'd carried on, it would be more of the same. And in a sense, too much makes Jack a dull boy, And so I was very fortunate to have that, in my life. And the first bit I had to do is get used to not having a schedule and not having a driving force behind me that was obsessional. Let's face it, what I did was obsessional. So that felt really awkward. And also, being bald, everywhere, I walked out in the street, everybody recognized me. It was everywhere. So in a sense, the baldness, and my wife once, on a big birthday of mine, she sent out an invitation that said, come celebrate 40 years with a man who will never go grey. So being bald made me very recognizable because, people wore wigs back then and everything. So, everybody recognized me. And the funny thing about it is, of course, being bald, I haven't really changed my hair. I haven't lost any more hair. So I ostensibly look the same as I did when I was younger. But that whole thing of having that pressure of success was very, very difficult. But again, it's the people around you, in that case, my friends and family, that were really supportive and helped and enabled me. And a really good agent called Athel Still, who had gone to the Olympic Games. He wrote for the Times, and he was also leading a commentator. So I understood what was going on, and I understood it was all part of a package of success, and that's why, I mentioned earlier on that, in a sense, sometimes living with winning is harder than winning. Because it's every day the consequences of that, and they affect your decisions.
And I'd be really interested in your perspective on, there's lots of books about team sports and individual sportsmen and how the qualities of getting to be a world-class athlete or sports person translates into the world of business. How did you find that?
Well, I suppose I was lucky because swimming is an individual sport, everybody, but it's not. It's actually a team sport too. And in fact, swimmers are called squaddies because it's almost like being in the army. You become welded together because it's probably one of the most demanding. I'd say it is the most demanding of all sports because, it's environmental. You've got no resistance. You've got to turn off land-based stuff. And so you've got to learn to become part of the water and everything. And in addition to that, every little movement or pressure in your hand and your feet and through your body is important. So it's more similar to tennis than that.
Yeah.
So you train as a squad. You compete as a club or a country or whatever. You have relays. So it gave me a massive flexibility of experiences to draw across. And the other thing is that swimming is beautifully objective. You know how many strokes you swim per length. You know what time you should be doing. So in the morning, you get up and go to the training session, and you've had several hundreds of goals. And then at breakfast, either somebody's drowning themselves in the cornflakes or they're really gung-ho. And when I was made captain, I got my head out of myself and started looking around. And I suppose that's when I realized that these people were having a bad breakfast, had things outside of swimming coming in and affecting them. They had relationship problems, work problems, whatever it was. And I realized there's a huge amount of slop over from life into the work lane, into swimming. And I thought, well, if it's happening to them, it's happening to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I adopted this philosophy of working my hardest on my worst days, because unless I had, a temperature, or I had, some kind of symptoms that showed that it was physical, I knew it was psychological because I've seen it in the team. And so that working my hardest on the worst day meant that my bad days, because it was psychological, broke through by halfway through the workout, but didn't break through. I got a kind of emotional high from breaking through. So the second half of the worst days became even better than my best days. And the really crucial thing is I learned to enjoy the really good days rather than try and work harder. I saved that for the bad days. And, it manifested itself really interestingly in business because, I wandered down to PricewaterhouseCoopers. I knew somebody there, one of the senior partners there, and said, look, why don't you take a total audit? And they went, what do you mean a total audit? I said, well, you audit books and you do, advice around business. But, when a chief executive has a heart attack, the company's suddenly in a lot of trouble. So, the health of the business is really important.
Mm.
And I said, what about, maybe, the chief executive gets divorced? Well, they're there, but they're not there for 6 months.
Yeah, yeah.
And what about, you talk about value systems in business. What about spiritual? What do they believe? Now, they junk the spiritual very quickly. And
they would not get that.
They thought about the kind of the physical, and it just happens that the guy went to a really great guy. So, well, okay, I'm in management change. Perhaps we should try it on ourselves, which they did. And we had this incredible course, which went through the partnership, and still, to my knowledge, is still running, where we took a complete audit, as it were. We pulled everything somebody is and said, okay, that's what you are. That's the actions. How many lanes are you swimming in your life? We know you got your work lane. What other lanes are you swimming in? And painfully, and still when you talk to people painfully, they have a real problem of even talking about the lanes, let alone the goals within those lanes outside their work experience. So this course was about, first of all, taking a full kind of physical to see how fit they were. And many had to go for some remedial therapy to get them fit enough to go on the course. And then looking at their psychology and what they're doing with themselves, and how, you can start using the lanes outside of work to support the confidence and your performance integrity. So the more lanes, the more things you're doing in life where you've got defined goals and you're moving forward and you've got direction, the more you feel purpose in your life, the more you feel confident. And, in a pool, each lane has a wave breaker, and it almost keeps the storm in one lane when the storm comes. And that ran for nearly a decade. I was involved in that. And it was just an incredible insight to how people at top level operate and don't operate.
Yeah, I've always found it strange that people say, I work so I can have a life, because work is such a big part of your life. It has to be integrated into it. And, what you're talking about is a lot of what we talk about, which is the emotional side of business. What excites people, what gets people out of bed in the morning, what's their purpose. All of those factors really affect all of the rational side of business. People love talking about the rational side of business, but they really struggle to bring in.
Put that softer stuff away.
Yeah.
Somebody I know who I work with, he took the swimming pool lane. He was in a buyer for a supermarket. And, he was buying about £750 million worth of supermarket stuff. And he took it into his team. And again, none of them had goals, really, personal goals. And by setting those personal goals very quickly, he found that the team changed. Because, just discussing one thing with somebody, say, well, what do you want to do in your private life? Oh, shall we put that on the board and see how you're doing in 6 months' time? Again, you're giving them permission to have a go at something that, they've parked, whether it's planning permission on a garage or whatever it is, And that then, of course, has the amazing thing of drawing the person to the business to feel more comfortable with the relationship and the loyalty within it.
Mm. And I know in your career you've given a lot back. I think it would be great to just talk about Swimathon a little bit and how that came about.
Well, I suppose that, as I said, I had this kind of mission behind me to put stuff back into sport. And a lot of my business activity naturally gravitated to that. And I also wanted to do it in swimming. And, I did a lot of sponsored swims and, talking to swimming clubs about success and helping swimming. And eventually I ran into this great guy called Graham Batterham, who wanted to try and emulate some of the success of the London Marathon. And we managed to get Princess Diana to launch it. And it's called Swimathon. And it happens every year that, approaching 600 pools taking part every year. And I thought, this is great. We can get a kind of a voice for swimming. Just regular swimmers. This is not competitive swimmers. They will appeal to everybody. And we couldn't get 35,000 or 36,000 people in one pool like the marathon does. So that's why we went to 600 pools. But we also realized that, because the pilot was just a long distance swim, that if we had, a series of swims that could be individual or as part of a team, you were making the most out of swimming. So, we have this great thing. Like one time I turned up down in Truro, I think it was, and Daniel was 5 years old. He swam one length with his parents cheering ahead, and his parents swam 199 lengths. But Daniel was part of the team, and that would be part of their family history for the rest of it. But anyway, our swimmers have done something incredible. They've raised over £56 million for charity.
Wow.
It's been a fantastic, and again, I suppose, an example of, if you do the right things and you have a mission, then you collect people around you, or you find people, or maybe the ether lets you encounter people that want to do things with you.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, we're coming to this sort of end of our time, and we always sort of end with a fun fact. And we try to sort of pick on something that is a bit surprising. And you had 2 or 3, but I did love the writing for the FT.
Well, I got to tell you, it was extraordinary. I got this handwritten letter from the FT, and I've got a great friend who's a journalist, and I thought it was a stitch up. They were asking me if I'd come in and talk about writing for the FT, and I thought, this has got to be my mate winding me up, particularly as it was dated 1st of April. So it sat on my desk for quite a long time. And then I thought, I'm going to phone up the switchboard and ask for this bloke, just to check. Anyway, so I phoned up, and the editor came on, and he goes, well, I did think when I wrote 1st of April whether you might think it's an April Fool. Because, I mean, in a sense, if you talk to any of my teachers, at school, or even at the university, they would have been much more surprised by me writing for the FT than winning a gold medal.
Oh, that's a brilliant story to finish with. And anyway, just a huge thank you, Duncan, for spending the time to come on Pivot Points. It's always an absolute joy to talk to you. You just bring great energy into any sort of conversation. So thank you very much.
It's been fun, and thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pi and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpi.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.